Hi guys! Okay, I am doing a walk-in to look at an area that I'm going to be doing my hot tent solo first camp out in. It's over here in the primitive camping area of the shooting club I'm part of, which is not far from my home. Again, I have tested it, the stove. I have tested them together, so I feel confident that we can do an overnighter. And now it's coming out and just setting out doing it. I'm going to take this quick moment. I've got a few minutes this afternoon just to walk over here and look at the site before I get over here and find out that in this bad weather we've had the last couple of days, a tree may have fallen, something may have happened. I want to be sure my wood supply and etc. so when I come in here and set up, we're good to go. But I want to talk to you about cold and what are the signs of hypothermia. Because this recent cold snap showed you, if nothing else, how quickly the world can turn against you. Well, being down here from the south, my big thing is usually heat. So I am very well aware of heat stroke and all the various problems that go along with that. But you also got to be aware of the opposite. Wow, what a deer trail. That is a major highway right there. Alrighty. So, they don't allow hunting in the club. Anyway. So what is the major symptom? Well, you can look up the actual official designation. But I'll give you a down and dirty, there's a deer scrape right there. A down and dirty redneck version of it. And that is this. Shift out of that incoming sun. Number one, you get cold, uncomfortably cold. And your body starts trying to counteract because you ain't got enough layers. You're not acclimated to it or whatever, and so you start getting colder. When that happens, you start shivering. Shivering is the body's way of shaking, therefore to use mechanical action and make metabolism to generate body heat, trying to warm up. So, as I tell people, if your feet are cold, put a hat on. The head is one of the biggest losers of heat on the body. And normally you'll see guys all these big old bundled up, and they'll be bareheaded or they'll be wearing a baseball cap or something and not insulating their heads. And the body has got to warm that brain. So you need good insulation on the head. But back to, if you start feeling cold and you start shivering, can I add layers or can I improve? Can I button up or something to try to get rid of that? No. Can I walk faster, walk a little harder, climb a little harder, whatever to generate a little body heat to try to counteract that and give me the necessary warmth that my body is craving? This is going to be where I'm going to set up between these two pine trees right here. I've slung my hammock up here several times, and in fact, New Year's Day last year, this is where I did my Happy New Year video. So I will be slinging it up right here. And then I got plenty of room to set up the size of that wall tent around it. I've got the official name of that onewind tent. I just ain't got it in my head at the moment. I will put it down here. That's the official name of that tent. So, back to, you've tried exercising whatever, you can't. When it progresses, it goes from just minor shaking to full body shaking, violent shaking sometimes, depending. Here's a little test. Take your pinky and touch your thumb. If you can't do that, if it gets to where you don't want to do that, you've got problems. You're probably in stage 1 hypothermia. You need to stop, get a fire going, or get out of the weather if at all possible by whatever situation you're in, okay? Stage 2 is where you've got uncontrollable shaking. You can't seem to make it stop no matter what you do. And that in itself is a good thing. because the body is still fighting, the body is still trying to produce the heat, the body is still trying to keep you going. What happens at 3? That's when the shaking stops. The body reaches a point of just saying, screw it. Usually by that stage, by actually 1 and 2, depending on the person and how acclimated they've been to it in the past, they start getting a little confused, a little addle-headed. They don't want to do anything. They just want to stand there. It's like they're shutting down. It's almost a mild form of shock. But what they're doing is they're being overloaded. The body is focusing on trying to stay warm and shutting down all of the conserves. It starts shuttling the blood from the hands and the feet to the center core, trying to keep you warm, trying to keep the brain and everything functioning. So the hands get colder, the legs get colder, and you become inactive. You just want to come to a stop other than shaking. And then the shaking stops. This is a big, 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 big red flag. That means the body's giving up. You're going downhill to die then. So if you're with someone and whatever the situation is and they quit shaking, but there hasn't been any reason for them to stop shaking, you got to start. You can't wait any possibly longer. Fun time has ended. I hear stories, and I've read a lot of stuff on it, of them finding a lot of people in extreme cold like that, and explorers, people in avalanches, stuff like being found butt naked. Because a lot of times what happens is when they hit that stop shaking point, the body is as cold as it's going to be. The body just gives up and opens up all them blood vessels and lets that blood run back. And suddenly their arms and legs, they feel like they're just burning alive because they've been cold so long. And now that warmth rushes back in and they're hypersensitive to it, and they are not thinking clearly, they're not acting clearly, and they think they are burning up, and they just start stripping off clothes. And you find them froze. So, how do you educate yourself? Well, number 1, if I start shaking, I need to start adjusting. Let's put my head on, cover on, let's put the extra jacket on, let's build a fire, let's drink something warm, let's bring that core temperature up. That's your body warning you, we're getting a little cool here, boss. So the first signs of shaking, start adding another layer. Start trying to find a way to warm it up. 2, if you've got to where you're violently shaking and you cannot do that, it's done to quit being playtime. Get out of the woods, get out of the cold, get out of whatever if at all possible. Get the fire going now, get something warm in your core temperature is too low. Now what if you come upon and you find somebody that has got that way? You have found somebody else who is just less fortunate than you, and they've got out here and their core temperature has dropped down like that, and now they can't do that, and they're just not thinking clearly, and they quit shaking. The worst thing you can do is give them a big old mug of hot coffee, because the shock will probably kill them. I remember reading a story as a boy of these, I believe they were Norwegian fishermen. Now Norwegian fishermen go out in Arctic waters in the dead of winter fishing, and so they're kind of conditioned to it. And so this ship had gone down, this fishing vessel had gone down into water temps that should kill a person in minutes, and yet they had survived a couple of hours in that water. And whenever the rescue vessel came up and found them, they threw them a line and pulled them all out of the water. They'd been in the water for, I think, somewhere around right at 2 hours. And they got out. They all went downstairs to the galley, stripped off, wrapped up in blankets, and sat down, and they had one of them horseshoe round tables. And everybody got in there side and side, and the cook came up and had big old mugs of coffee. And every man drank coffee, and every one of them died in less than 30 seconds. They just fell over on each other like dominoes because their systems couldn't take that hot change. That transition was too much. It killed them. I remember seeing the picture of all them guys leaning over against each other, and like just going around the thing. Every one of them dead. They'd been alive and suddenly their heart stopped. They couldn't take the shock. So, how to warm them up? If you found them, or it's you, well, my recommendation is if you can get the fire going, great. But don't put your chest automatically toward it. If you need to stand up and walk around it and turn around, that's great. That's a good way to warm up because you're up in the warmth column and you're letting your legs. Keep standing there and shuffling your weight back and forth, whatever you got to do to keep active and bring the core up. If you just can't hardly do nothing, you got to sit down. Put your back to the fire. Now this is something that don't make intuitive sense, but it actually works really well. In your back is where your kidneys and most of the blood stores up. All your vitals are closer that way than this way. And so when you're hunched forward like this by a fire, you're putting your face to fire, that's great. But you're actually shielding your body from the bulk of the warmth and exposing your bare back, so to speak, to the cold. If you turn around and put your back to the fire and let it warm you up, that way you'll warm up faster and better by putting your back to the fire, if at all possible. But the number one rule is don't get in this situation unless we got to. Now I can speak from personal experience of hypothermia. I have fallen into the river a couple of times in my life. Sometimes when I was alone, sometimes when there was just no choice because of the swift current. Once I fell in, I was on my own. They couldn't come back for me, they had to go. And I had to be on my own. And so I have had the violent shaking, just unbelievable shaking that you can't control. I've had that. I've had it where my feet, my toes and fingers. I've had minor frostbite on my feet before being up north in the cold on job sites and things like that. So I have experienced extreme cold. And so I can tell you, once you see that first sign, act. Yeah, it's okay to be a little cool, okay? And if you're someone who spends a lot of time in the outdoors, who therefore is kind of acclimated, not such a big deal. Being cool is fine. Your body will step up and generate a little more heat, as long as you don't shiver. A little minor, like bunnies running across your grave, yeah, okay. Or even a little bit of light shiver, as long as I can move and it quits, As long as I keep moving and it quits, I'm okay. But if it progresses to that violent shiver, if I get to where I can't do that, this has become serious, it's time to do something. Forget about that flint and steel, pull out that lighter. Pull out those ready-made fire makers that you carry for just such an emergency. Strike up, get a fire, build a fire. I don't mean a little bitty two twigs together. Build a fire. Get your core temperature up. And don't walk away until you get that core temperature back up and you're back where you need to be. Carrying a canteen, and the canteen cup, you can heat up water, even if you don't have coffee, nothing with you. But I can heat up water. Many times that has pulled me back from the edge by being able to heat up a canteen of water and drink warm water and bring my core temperature up. Whatever you got to do, do it. Don't play with it. Because depending on how much you've been exposed to extreme cold, how much you and your body have been exposed to extreme conditions, is how easily it can adapt and kind of weather it. People who have spent most of their life in cities and controlled environments and air conditioning and heating and have never been truly that cold, I mean cold, they go down quick because their body goes into shock. It's overwhelmed. It don't know what's happening. Same thing in heat stroke. The guys that work out in the heat all day, they get heat stroke, but it's harder for them to get heat stroke because they're kind of conditioned to it and they recognize the signs. Same thing with the guys that work out in extreme cold conditions. And ladies, I don't mean to just say one side, but ladies too, who are out in extreme cold conditions, know when they're getting too cold and how to react to it. And they've got experience. It's one of those painful experiences. Having had frostbite, having had heat stroke, having had hypothermia, I can tell you, it's one of them lessons you'll never forget and you never want to repeat. In closing, a good friend of mine was a Marine, and he taught for the Marine contingent at the Arctic Survival School for a while. And he talked about the Marine Corps was looking at, there was way too many Marines going up there and getting frostbite on the hands and feet and etc. And they did the thing about, if your hands are cold, stick them in your armpits. Or stick them, sit down, put them in your crotch to warm them up. Get that blood circulating, etc. So they were losing too many. So they came up with this process. And they said it was because that the average person hadn't had experience in such cold and things, and so they need to reprogram the body. And so they rigged this school up, and you had to lay down in warm water, and you put your hands and feet into these pools on either side of you that was ice water, and you lay there for 30 minutes. And then you got up and you laid down in ice water and put your hand and feet into warm water. And you did this for 4 hours. Every 30 minutes you changed. It did a great job at reducing how many of the special forces were getting frostbite. But whether it was because it trained the body to increase circulation to those parts during those extremes, or because they told you if you ever got frostbite, you had to go back to that school again, and nobody wanted to go back to that school again. Grown men crying, having to lay down in that ice water and just sit there and just violently shaking. Then you got to get up and go the other way, and now the other side's shaking. Nobody wanted to go through that again. Painful experience. Well, guys, Happy New Year. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button before you go. I'd really appreciate it. And it looks like my area is ready to go for me to come out here later this week and do me a overnighter. So we'll be doing that and posting it as soon as I can. Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.